I sat there, staring down at my phone like it might say something different if I looked long enough. Fifth time reading that same message. Sorry, Dorothy. We're not going to make it to your tiny wedding. It's just too far for something that small. Yeah, my own mom sent that. Right after, the text rolled in from my 3 sisters and both my brothers, each echoing the same thing in their own cold way. Not a single person in my family was planning to show up on my wedding day. Gary, my fiancé, found me out on the balcony of our apartment. I was sitting there, gripping my phone like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Tears just streaming down my face. "What's going on, Liv?" he asked as he knelt beside me, his hand warm and steady as it wrapped around mine. Even then, even with him right there, I felt this coldness creeping through my chest like I was freezing from the inside out. "My family's not coming," I whispered. My voice barely made it out. "Not a single one of them." I watched his expression shift. I could see the anger rising beneath the surface. We'd spent months planning this beautiful, intimate ceremony, just 30 people, up on a cliff with the Pacific Ocean stretching out behind us. We didn't want some huge event with 1,000 people we barely knew. We wanted something meaningful, something real. "They called it tiny," I said, starting to feel the sadness twist into something sharper. "Like that made it worthless or embarrassing." "Mom said it wasn't worth traveling for." Gary gently took the phone from my hand and started reading the messages. I watched his jaw clench tighter with every swipe. "This is brutal, Liv. I'm so sorry." What none of them knew, what only Gary and I were aware of, was that this so-called tiny wedding was costing over $300,000. 6 months back, Gary had quietly sold his tech startup. The number he got for it still makes my head spin. But we didn't tell anyone. We wanted to keep things simple, keep people grounded. We didn't want folks treating us differently just because we had money. "Let them think whatever they want," I said, finally drying my eyes. "This day, it's for us, not for them." Still, even as the days went by, the sting didn't let up. Every time I stepped into my gown, which, by the way, cost more than some people's sports cars, I thought about how none of my sisters would ever see me in it. When Gary and I sat down for our menu tasting with the Michelin-starred chef we'd hired, all I could think about was my dad. He would have gone nuts over that perfectly aged ribeye. "I can't believe how shallow they're being," my best friend Shirley said one afternoon. She was helping me address our $200 a piece, handcrafted invitations. "Just because you're not throwing some tacky ballroom circus, they act like it doesn't count." My mom literally asked why we're even bothering with a ceremony if it's going to be that small, I told her, doing my best not to let my voice crack. She actually suggested we just hit the courthouse and grab dinner somewhere nice afterward. Shirley let out a snort. If she only knew. The truth was, we could have easily invited hundreds of people. Hell, we could have paid for everyone's flights and put them up in 5-star hotels for a week. Money wasn't the problem. We just wanted a celebration that meant something. One filled with people who really cared. Turns out, very few of those people were blood relatives. 2 weeks before the big day, my youngest sister Emma called. I saw her name pop up, and for a second, I let myself hope, maybe she'd changed her mind. "I've been thinking about your wedding," she started, and I held my breath. "Do you think there's any way you could push it to next year? Maybe plan something a little bigger so everyone can come?" It hit me like a punch to the chest. "No, Emma. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Everything's already in place." She just kept going, like I hadn't said anything. "It feels selfish to have it so far away, especially when you know Mom can't afford to travel right now. And with only 30 people, it's like you don't even want us there." I swallowed every bitter word on the tip of my tongue. The truth? Mom could afford it. She just got back from a cruise with her friends. And I did want them there. I wanted them more than anything. They were the ones who chose not to come. "I have to go," I said quietly, and I ended the call. Then I went into the spare bedroom, closed the door, and cried until my throat felt raw. The night before the wedding, Gary found me back out on the balcony. The city lights shimmered beneath us, and even though the night was warm, I had a blanket wrapped around me. Having second thoughts, he asked gently, sitting beside me. I shook my head. Not about you. Never about you. But he knew better. I keep picturing tomorrow, I said softly. How beautiful everything will be. The flowers, the food, the music, exactly how we dreamed it. And not one person from my family will see any of it. Gary reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. I've got an idea, he said, a bit hesitantly. It's kinda petty, but it might help. I gave a little smile. Go on. What if we have the photographer take some absolutely jaw-dropping photos, you know, the kind that belong in celebrity magazines, and we don't post them right away. We wait a month. Then we put out a few. Just enough to show them exactly what they missed. I paused, thinking it over. That's definitely petty. He nodded. It is. But sometimes, being petty feels kinda great. I actually laughed then, really laughed. All right. Let's do it. The morning of the wedding arrived, clear skies and sunshine. The whole venue looked like it had been lifted out of a dream, perched high on a cliff, white flowers draping the platform where we'd say our vows, and the ocean stretching out endlessly behind it. When I stepped into my gown, Shirley let out this soft gasp. You look like a goddess, she whispered, carefully adjusting the veil that trailed behind me like a cloud. As I stood waiting for my cue to walk down the aisle, this strange peace settled over me. Yes, my family had chosen not to be here. And yeah, that pain still lingered, sharp and deep. But when I looked out and saw the faces of the people who had shown up, friends who truly loved us, I knew we'd made the right call. Then I saw Gary, standing there with tears in his eyes, and everything else faded into the background. The ceremony was exactly what we'd envisioned, intimate, heartfelt, deeply personal. We read the vows we'd written ourselves, and when Gary promised to be my family, now and always, that's when the wall I'd built around my heart finally started to crack. We held the reception in this stunning glass-walled pavilion perched high above the ocean. As the sun dipped low, the sky turned into a masterpiece, shades of fiery orange and soft pink washing over everything. Dinner was served in 7 courses, each one more incredible than the last, paired with rare wines I couldn't even pronounce. Our 30 guests were seated at a single, elegantly long table, decked out in thousands of white roses and enough candlelight to make it glow like a dream. A string quartet played softly in the background, adding this quiet grace to it all. This is the most magical wedding I've ever been to, my college roommate said, her eyes wide as she looked around. It's like a fairy tale. I smiled, though part of me couldn't help remembering my mom's text, how she'd shrugged it off. Tiny, she'd called it. If only she could see it now. The silk tablecloths had been hand-painted. We were eating with 24-karat gold flatware and sipping from crystal glasses that had been blown by artisans in Venice. The food? We had caviar, melt-in-your-mouth Wagyu beef, and champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's rent. Later on, when Gary and I had our first dance, we moved across a floor of Italian marble flown in just for this one day. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder. You happy? He murmured into my hair. I really thought about it before answering. Was I happy? Honestly, the day had been nothing short of perfect. Our closest friends had surrounded us with genuine love. The setting, the food, the music, it was everything we'd planned and hoped for. But even in all that joy, I couldn't ignore the empty space where my family should have been. I'm happy to be your wife, I said softly. The rest, it's complicated. He nodded, always understanding. You still want to go ahead with the photos? I pictured the texts again. The way my sisters had brushed it off. My mom implying the whole thing wasn't worth it because it wasn't big enough. Yeah, I said with more certainty this time. Absolutely. As the evening wore on, I started to unwind. I laughed, danced, and genuinely enjoyed myself. The people who had come were incredible. Their presence felt like a warm hug after weeks of emotional cold shoulders. We toasted, we danced some more, and we shared a slice of cake that cost more than my first car. No joke. 5 tiers, flown in from a Parisian pastry chef, and every bite was a masterpiece. Just before midnight, our photographer, this insanely talented woman who usually shoots celebrity weddings, pulled us aside. "I've got a few previews ready," she said, practically glowing with excitement. "No edits, straight out of the camera, and they're unbelievable." She scrolled through her screen and stopped on one that made my breath catch. It was the shot of Gary and me, sharing our first kiss as husband and wife. Behind us, the ocean stretched into forever, the sunset wrapping us in golden light. It looked like it belonged on a movie poster. Or the front page of a luxury bridal magazine. "Perfect," I said, locking eyes with Gary. "That's the one we save." The celebration kept going well into the early hours. And just when our guests thought the night was over, we had one final surprise waiting. At 2 a.m., fireworks exploded over the ocean, an entire show, choreographed to our favorite songs. As bursts of white and gold lit up the sky, Gary wrapped his arms around me from behind. "No regrets?" he asked. I watched the light reflect off the water, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. "Just one," I admitted. "That they'll never really understand what they missed." He kissed the side of my head. "Oh, they'll know," he said with a quiet smile. "In about a month, they'll definitely know." The honeymoon was even more over the top than the wedding. 3 weeks cruising the Mediterranean on a private yacht. We swam in crystal-clear coves, ate the kind of food you only see on cooking shows, and made love under the stars like something out of a romance novel. It was bliss. It was healing. And for a little while, I forgot how much it had hurt to be abandoned by my own family. Almost forgot. But not quite. When we finally got back home, the wedding album was waiting for us. A giant leather-bound book, packed with images so breathtaking they barely looked real. Gary and I spent the whole night flipping through it, reliving every moment, every smile, every tear. "They're ready," I said, looking over at him. "The photos. Are we actually doing this?" Gary raised an eyebrow. "Getting cold feet?" he teased gently. "We don't have to if it doesn't feel right." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to rise above it, to be the bigger person, let the hurt go. But the other part? The part that still felt raw and bruised? That part wanted to show them exactly what they'd called unworthy of their time. "Let's sleep on it," I said. Later that night, just before I fell asleep, my phone pinged with a new post. It was Emma, my youngest sister, sharing photos from the weekend. A cousin's backyard barbecue. My entire family was there. 3 states away from us, sure, but still not exactly local to them either. Her caption read, "Nothing better than family gatherings. Worth traveling for the people you love." Red heart. I turned my phone and showed Gary without saying a word. After a pause, he said, "Well, I think that answers that." The next morning, I sat down and picked 3 photos. The first one showed the ceremony setup, white flowers everywhere, the ocean behind us, 30 elegant white chairs lined up perfectly. The second captured our reception table glowing in the golden sunset, all crystal and gold and soft candlelight. And the last one? It was our first dance. Me in my custom-designed gown, Gary looking flawless in his tux, the marble floor gleaming beneath our feet. I posted them to Instagram with one simple caption. 1 month ago today, I married the love of my life in an intimate ceremony overlooking the Pacific. It was exactly the wedding we wanted. Small, meaningful, and absolutely perfect. #JustMarried #1 month anniversary. Then I waited. Didn't take long. The notifications started flying in within the hour. First came the comments from friends who'd been there, reminiscing about how magical it all was. Then came the ones from friends who hadn't been invited, people just in awe of the photos. And, finally, my family showed up. Emma messaged me privately, "WTF Dorothy? Then my other sisters chimed in with public comments like, "This doesn't look tiny to me, and why didn't you tell us it was going to be like this?" My phone started buzzing again, this time it was my mom calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text popped up, "I need to talk to you right away. Please call me back." I turned the screen toward Gary, who was sitting next to me with his laptop open, working on something. He glanced over, then put his laptop aside and scrolled through the latest notifications on my phone. "How's it feel?" he asked gently, his tone unreadable. I really sat with that question for a second. Honestly? There was a part of me that felt some twisted satisfaction seeing their stunned reactions. I won't lie. But underneath that flicker of revenge was something heavier, this deep ache. They weren't upset because they'd missed an important milestone in my life. They were upset because they'd missed something fancy. Something they could have shown off. "I don't know what I feel," I admitted. Vindicated maybe, but also disappointed. "All over again." Gary nodded. "That makes sense. It's a mix." My phone rang again, Mom, for the third time. I took a long breath, then picked it up. "Dorothy," she said right away, no hello or preamble. "I don't understand. Those photos, that was your wedding?" "Yeah, Mom. That was the wedding. The tiny one you all decided wasn't worth traveling for." There was this pause, just long enough to make the silence uncomfortable. "But it looks. I mean, it must have cost a fortune." I cut in before she could ramble. "Yes. It did. But how could you and Gary, when did this?" I stopped her again. "Does it really matter? Would you have come if you'd known it was going to be some Instagram-worthy spectacle? If you knew there would be photos you could brag about?" She didn't respond. And honestly, that silence told me everything I needed to hear. "Thought so," I whispered. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up, tears slipping down my cheeks before I could stop them. Gary was already reaching for me, and I folded into his arms like my whole body had just run out of energy. "I know it hurts," he murmured into my hair. "But you stood up for yourself. That matters." I nodded against his chest. I just wish they'd wanted to come because they loved me, not because the event looked impressive. Throughout the day, my phone kept lighting up. Messages from extended family, old friends I hadn't talked to in years, even my old high school English teacher. Everyone wanted to know more about this incredible seaside wedding they'd seen in my photos. Then, finally, my brother texted. The one who'd stayed silent through it all. "Those pictures are wild. The whole thing looks amazing. I'm sorry I missed it." At least he said sorry. That was more than anyone else had managed. I typed out a quick, simple response, "Thank you." That was it. By that evening, Mom had moved from stunned silence to full-blown defensiveness. Her latest voicemail was full of indignation, how I should have told everyone about the wedding being so fancy, how she would have come if she'd known, and how I had misled the entire family on purpose. Gary listened to the message with me. His jaw tightened as she spoke. "Well, that's some serious revisionist history," he said dryly. "You invited them. They said no. End of story." I dropped the phone on the table with a sigh. I knew it. I knew they'd try to make it my fault somehow. He looked over. "Do you regret posting the photos?" I thought about it, really thought. "No," I said finally. "They made their decision. I don't have to protect them from the consequences." He gave me the smallest smile. "There she is." Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, another text popped up. It was from Emma, my youngest sister. "I really messed up, didn't I? The wedding looked beautiful. You looked beautiful. I'm sorry I wasn't there." It was the first real apology I'd received from anyone in my family. And it hit me hard, tears filled my eyes all over again. I showed Gary the message. "What do you think? Should I write back?" He looked at it for a beat. That feels sincere, he said thoughtfully. Maybe that's one bridge you don't need to burn. I nodded slowly, then typed out a reply. Thank you. It was beautiful. And yes, I missed having you there. Her response came back almost immediately. Can I come visit soon? I want to hear everything. Not just the pretty parts, everything. And just like that, something shifted in me. I felt a spark of hope. Maybe small, but real. Yes, I replied. I'd like that. I put my phone down, and Gary pulled me into a hug. You doing okay? I curled into him, thinking about everything, what we'd lost, what we'd gained, and what we were building together. I will be, I said. And for the first time in months, I wasn't just saying it. I actually believed it. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls and more than 100 text messages. My family had gone from stunned to furious overnight. How dare I not tell them about the wedding's extravagance? How could I let them miss something that important? Didn't I realize how it made them look? Not a single one of them said, I'm sorry. No one admitted they'd declined the invite. They're trying to rewrite the story, I told Gary over our morning coffee. To hear my mom tell it, I basically scammed them by not handing out a budget spreadsheet before the wedding. Gary reached across the table, taking my hand in his. What do you want to do? He asked. You can block them for a bit if you need space. I shook my head. No. I think I need to face this, get it all out once and for all. Right then, my phone rang again. It was my oldest sister, Brenda. I answered, putting her on speaker so Gary could hear every word. Dorothy, she started immediately, her voice tight. I can't believe you would do this to us. You've made us look terrible. I kept my tone calm. I didn't do anything to you, Brenda. You chose not to come because you said it wasn't worth the trip for something so small. Your words, not mine. She paused. You know what I mean. You never said it was going to be that fancy. I closed my eyes for a second, doing my best to keep my temper in check. So let me get this straight, I said, trying to stay calm. You would have come only if you knew there'd be expensive food and fancy decorations? That it had to be luxurious for you to show up for your own sister? That's not fair, Brenda shot back quickly. Mom can't afford to travel all the time, you know. And yet, I said, cutting her off, Mom was just on a cruise last month. 4 different countries. She posted pictures with drinks in her hand and sunsets in the background. So don't tell me a 2-hour flight was out of reach. Another pause. This one was quieter, softer. It looked really beautiful, Liv, she said finally. It was, I replied, flat and simple. And you missed it. After I hung up, Gary pulled me into a hug without saying anything. You okay? He asked gently. I leaned into him. Actually, yeah. It felt good to finally say what I've been holding in. That phone call was just the first. Over the next week, I had similar conversations with most of my family. My brothers weren't as confrontational as Brenda, but they were just as good at making excuses. Then there was my dad. Divorced from my mom for over a decade. He didn't call, just sent a card with a check inside and a short note, congratulations. Wish I had been there. As if he hadn't also said no thanks to the invitation. Only Emma, my youngest sister, seemed to really understand. True to her word, she came out to visit 2 weeks after our photos made the rounds through the family group chats and beyond. When I opened the front door, she didn't say anything, she just started crying. I'm so sorry, Dorothy, she choked out. I can't believe I missed your wedding because I thought it wasn't going to be impressive enough. There was no deflection. No denial. Just raw, unfiltered regret. I wrapped her in a hug. Come in, I said softly. I've got about 1,000 pictures to show you. That night, over wine and snacks, I opened the wedding album. She gasped at almost every page. The hand-painted place cards. The signature cocktails inspired by moments in our relationship. The vintage car that carried us from ceremony to reception like something out of an old film. It's not just that it was expensive, Emma whispered as she studied one of the floral arrangements. It's that everything feels so you. You and Gary. Every little detail tells your story. My throat tightened. That's exactly what we were going for. We didn't want a cookie-cutter wedding, we wanted something that reflected us. I really screwed up, she admitted, looking up at me with eyes full of guilt. When I saw the invite said 30 people, I just assumed. You assumed it wasn't worth your time, I finished gently. She nodded, ashamed. Mom kept saying it would be this quick little thing in a park, she said. She told everyone you were probably trying to save money, and that we could celebrate later properly. That was the first I'd heard of any of that. Mom actually said that? I never told her anything like that. I know now, Emma said. After seeing the pictures, I realized she just made up her own version. We all did. And we were wrong. It hurt to hear, but I appreciated her honesty more than I could say. Thank you for owning that, I said. You're the only one who has. She sighed. The others are embarrassed. They know they messed up, but instead of admitting it, they're trying to make it your fault. And what about you? I asked, looking her in the eye. Aren't you embarrassed too? Yes, she said without hesitation. But more than anything, I'm sad. I missed my sister's wedding because I was shallow and careless. And I'm not going to add to that by being too proud to admit it. That, right there, was the moment something in me finally let go. It wasn't all fixed, not even close, but just having one family member tell the truth lifted something heavy from my shoulders. That night, Gary joined us for dinner. He was a little guarded at first, keeping an eye on Emma the way someone watches a stranger holding something fragile. But after a while, he started to warm up to her. Around her second glass of wine, Emma leaned in a little. Okay, I have to ask, she said, half laughing. How did you pull that off? The wedding looked like it cost a small fortune. Gary and I exchanged a look. We had kept the story of his company sale private for a reason, mainly to avoid exactly the kind of attention and pressure we were now dealing with. It did cost a lot, Gary admitted. I sold my company last year. Emma's eyes went wide. Wait, that little app startup? Someone actually bought it? He nodded. For way more than we expected. But we didn't tell anyone because we wanted time to figure out our lives without everyone weighing in. So when Mom kept saying you couldn't afford a real wedding, we could have thrown 10 of them, I said dryly. That was never the issue. We just wanted something intimate. Something meaningful. Not a giant party with 300 people we barely knew. She looked down at her glass. That makes it even worse. When you sent out those invites, with just 30 names on the list, you were telling us we were the most important people in your life. I nodded. Exactly. Tears filled her eyes again. The next morning, Emma woke up early and asked to see everything, the videos, the menu, the wedding playlist. She wanted it all. I showed her clips of the vows, told her about the little rain shower that cleared up just in time for the ceremony, and how a shooting star appeared during our first dance. She sat silently through most of it, just absorbing everything. Then, as we finished up brunch, she looked at me and said, I have an idea. I raised an eyebrow. What if we had a small reception here, nothing over the top? Just a casual family get-together where people can see the photos, the videos, and maybe get a chance to say they're sorry? Face to face. I hesitated. I don't know, Emma. Most of them still seem more angry about looking bad than actually being sorry. I get it, she said. But let me try. Let me talk to them. Maybe they just need someone to push them out of their own pride. I looked over at Gary, who just gave me a small shrug. It's up to you, Liv. If it gives you peace, I'm on board. After Emma left, promising to reach out to everyone, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. I sat with Gary in the quiet, chewing on the idea. Do you think I should do it? I asked him. Have this little family reception? Gary thought about it for a moment before answering. I think this might be the bridge they need, the one that lets them admit they messed up without having to fully eat crow. People don't always do well with straight-up shame. They need a softer way back sometimes. I smiled and leaned in to kiss him. When did you get so wise? He grinned. Been watching a lot of therapy TikToks lately. Surprisingly helpful. 2 days later, Emma called with news. Everyone's in, she said, almost breathless. Mom was the toughest, no surprise there. But once Dad said yes, and the boys agreed, she didn't want to be the only one left out. I raised an eyebrow. Did you tell them about Gary's company? The money? Of course not, she said, dead serious. That's your story to tell. I just said this was their chance, to show up, make things right, and start over if they wanted to. So we set the date. 3 weeks from then. And let me tell you, those 3 weeks were an emotional roller coaster. Some days I looked forward to it, maybe this would be healing. Other days, I resented the whole idea. I kept swinging between hope and hurt, between wanting closure and wanting to keep the door shut. Gary, like always, stayed steady. Never once telling me to just forgive or forget, never pushing me toward any version of peace that wasn't real. Whatever happens, he said one night as he rubbed my back while I stared at the ceiling, we'll face it together. If they apologize, awesome. If not, we'll handle that too. The day finally came. We kept it simple. No decorations, no fanfare, just some good food from our favorite restaurant, drinks, the wedding album, and the video queued up and ready. This wasn't a second reception. It was a conversation with snacks. My dad was the first to show up. He handed me a gift-wrapped crystal vase and gave me the world's most awkward hug. Congratulations again, he said stiffly. The photos were something else. Thanks for coming, I replied, keeping my tone polite but distant. Next came my brothers and their wives. They shuffled in like kids headed to the principal's office, clearly uncomfortable, but making an effort. They complimented the apartment, asked Gary a few surface-level questions about his work. Then came the trio, my mom and 2 older sisters. As soon as they stepped inside, the air thickened. My mom took one long look around, clearly sizing up the place, the view, the neighborhood, probably calculating Zillow estimates in her head. Dorothy, she said with a brief, cool smile, kissing the air next to my cheek. Your home is beautiful. Thanks, I said. Gary found it. An awkward silence followed, until Emma caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, encouraging nod. Gary leaned over and whispered, should we show the video? I nodded, and he gathered everyone into the living room where we had a projector set up. As the video began, no one said a word. They watched the sweeping shots of the venue, the gentle piano music, the ceremony framed by flowers and ocean waves. They saw me walking down an aisle blanketed in rose petals, Gary waiting for me with tears in his eyes. At one point, I heard my mother gasp, quiet, involuntary. No one moved. No one interrupted. They watched everything, the vows, the reception, the sparkler exit into the vintage rolls. By the time it ended, the room was dead silent. Then Brenda, my oldest sister, reached up to wipe her face. It was perfect, she whispered. Absolutely perfect. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yes. It was. My mom cleared her throat, her posture straightening like she was bracing herself for impact. Dorothy, she began, I think I speak for all of us when I say, she hesitated, her voice suddenly unsteady. We made a terrible mistake. I held my breath. We should have been there, she continued. It shouldn't have mattered how small or big the wedding was. You're my daughter. I should have shown up. And I'm sorry. Not because it turned out to be glamorous, but because I hurt you. It took everything I had to stay composed. Yes, I said, my voice shaking just slightly. You should have been there. Then one by one, the rest of my family spoke up. Each apology came out in its own awkward, clumsy way. Some more heartfelt than others. No one mentioned Gary's business. No one brought up the cost. They talked instead about what they'd missed, who they'd missed. And slowly, the room started to shift. My brothers asked Gary about our honeymoon, where we'd gone, what we'd done. My sisters flipped through the album, pointing out guests, asking about the flowers, the music. My dad found me during a lull and, in a quiet voice, said, "You were the most beautiful bride I've ever seen." When they all finally left, carrying leftovers and photo prints I had set aside, I collapsed onto the couch next to Gary. "That went better than expected," I said, exhaling for what felt like the first time all night. He put an arm around me and pulled me close. "Your mom's apology felt real." "Eventually," I said. "Once she got past her pride." "Do you feel like it's repaired?" he asked. I thought about it. "Not completely," I said honestly. "I won't forget how it felt, how alone I felt. But, it's a start. At least they've owned their part instead of twisting it around like they did at first." A week later, a package showed up at our door. Inside was a custom quilt, made with fabric squares printed with photos from the wedding. Our first dance. The sunset during our vows. Gary feeding me cake while we laughed. Attached was a card signed by every family member. "We can't go back and be there for your day, but we hope this helps you remember it always. With love and deepest apologies." I ran my fingers over the images, taking in each one. "It's beautiful," Gary said quietly as he looked at it beside me. "And unexpected." I nodded, my heart full of something that felt like peace, and a little sadness, too. "It is," I said. "It really is." The quilt didn't undo what had happened. It couldn't erase the pain, or rewrite the past. But it meant something. It was a gesture, real, thoughtful, and maybe even brave. An honest attempt to make things right. That night, Gary and I lay in bed beneath it, the weight of the fabric comforting in a way I didn't expect. He turned toward me, brushing a hand down my arm. "Any regrets about posting those photos?" he asked gently. I didn't answer right away. I let the question sit for a moment. The truth? The photos had shaken the family tree hard. They'd stirred up conflict, triggered defensiveness, exposed fractures we'd all pretended didn't exist. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. "No," I said finally, my voice steady. "I don't regret it anymore. Sometimes the truth needs air, even if it's uncomfortable." They had to see what they missed. And I needed to stop pretending it didn't hurt. He kissed my forehead, his lips warm and reassuring. "For what it's worth," he said, "you handled all of it with more grace than I ever could have mustered." I snuggled closer to him, resting my head on his chest. "The funny thing is," I said, "I would have been just as happy getting married at a courthouse. No big fanfare. Just them, if they had cared enough to show up." "I know," he whispered. "That's one of the reasons I love you." 6 months later, we hosted a dinner party for our first anniversary. The entire family showed up this time, on time, with gifts, and something even more valuable, a sincere effort to be present. Things weren't perfect. Some wounds still lingered just beneath the surface. But there was warmth in the room. Real warmth. As the night wound down and people began gathering their coats, my mom pulled me aside. Her tone was softer than I'd heard in years. "I've learned something from all this," she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "It's not about the decorations, or the location, or what's in it for me. What matters is showing up. Just being there, for the people you love." I hugged her, and as I did, I felt something shift. A final crack in the ice I'd carried around for far too long. "Better late than never, Mom," I whispered. After the last guest had gone and we were left with half-eaten cake and empty glasses, Gary came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Happy?" he murmured. I leaned back against him and took a deep breath, letting it settle in. I'm getting there, I said. One step at a time. He turned me gently so I was facing him. You know what I was thinking, he said, a twinkle in his eye. Maybe for our 5th anniversary, we renew our vows. Something small. Just family. I smiled. Not just at the idea, but at what it meant, a second beginning, a full circle moment. I'd love that, I told him. As long as you're there, the rest is just background. I'll be there, he promised. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. We stood there for a moment, just holding each other, surrounded by all the little pieces of our life, our photos, the quilt, the home we built together. And in that stillness, I realized something. Yes, the wedding had cost a fortune. Yes, it had been breathtaking. But those weren't the memories that mattered most. The photos that really counted weren't the ones we posted for effect. They were the ones etched into our hearts, tiny, quiet moments full of truth, the strength it took to say no more, the courage to face rejection, the grace to leave the door open anyway. I had once wanted my family to regret missing my wedding. And they did. But more importantly, we had all learned something about what a tiny wedding really is. It's not about a modest budget, or a short guest list, or a simple setting. A tiny wedding is one where the love is small, where pride outranks presence, where appearances matter more than connection. By that definition, our wedding, lavish or not, had been anything but tiny. It was full. Of meaning. Of love. Of people who chose to show up and be present. It had been exactly what we'd hoped for from the start. Not grand for grandeur's sake, but intimate, intentional, and, in the end, healing. Not tiny at all. But vast. Immeasurably so.